Ed, you've kicked around the idea, and we've talked about work-life balance. Can you really revisit that and tell us what you think about that?
You're really going to make me do that.
I am.
So again, as I mentioned numerous times before, I doubt that I'm the right guy to be talking about work-life balance because, I'm still trying to figure it out. And what I guess what I would share with you is maybe just some learnings that I've had, and some I've been able to execute on, some I've not been able to execute on. But I did catch a really good video about work-life balance from Ed Mylett, one of these guys that's out on YouTube, and we'll link it up in one of our messages down the road. But it talks about work-life balance, and it really comes down to, is there such a thing? Because if you're trying to get balance in stuff, it means that something's got to give and something's got to not give, right? So you're trying to find that balance. So will you ever find work-life balance? I don't know that you will. And kind of his point is that you may not be able to find balance in your work or your life, right? So typically it's how we do things at home. How do we compare work versus home? So if you think about it, anything that you're involved in, the kind of Mylett's point is that if you're doing something, you got to devote your energies to that. And if you can't do something else. And I think that's kind of the point of his conversation, is that if you're at work, you should be working, right? You kind of being in the moment, being where you're at. And if you're at home, you need to be at home, right? You don't need to be thinking about work. And one, he's got a whole bunch of little different hacks that he talks about, making that easier. And the one that I've adopted most recently is when I come home, I leave my phone in the car for at least the first hour of me walking through the door. So if you think about that, that was almost impossible for me to do because we're almost like magnets to our phones. So forcing yourself to be at a home versus at work. So, our sales team, they go home and they walk in the door and, they got their phone tinging and binging and something's going off and their boss is calling them and, all this stuff that goes on in our world that distracts us from where we should be, because when we're at home, we should be in the moment and we should be at home. So that's one that I've started to do. I leave my phone in the car, and like my wife can't hardly even believe it, that I'm not bringing my phone in because, past practice has been, if the phone went off, I went and answered it. So I think simple little hacks like that. One of the other hacks he talks about is booking the appointments with your family first. Because if you really want to spend time with your kids or spend time with your wife on a date night, shouldn't that be the first thing you put on your schedule? But we got our minds made up that we should be like work first. But what's wrong with putting, I'm going to come home early on Thursday night and take my bride on a date, right? Why can't we put that in the schedule and say, come Thursday night, that's what I'm doing? We can find time to show up at the Monday morning meeting or the sales meeting. We put that on our schedule. Why don't we put the meeting with our families on our schedule, right? Think about that. So those are some of the hacks that he talks about, because I think that, when you try to break it down, I'm not convinced that you can have, if you're really good at stuff, if you're really good at home and you're really good at work, you can't have balance, because if you're going to be a really good dad, a really good son, a really good husband, a really good wife, a really good spouse, you got to be all in. You can't be thinking about work when you're at home. And I know that might sound like crazy to most folks out there, but you can't balance. You're never going to balance that. When you're at home, be in the moment. The simple hack that I've talked about before is, when my son was younger, I was sitting, I'd come home. I was not a 50s dad, I'm not that old, but I'd come home and I would read the paper from cover to cover. Until one day he was 5 or 6 years old. He reached up and I was sitting in my chair, reading the paper because I had worked all day and I was tired. And my son came up and knocked the paper down, and I got up from there. When he knocked the paper out of my hands, I just got up. We had phones back in the day, Sonia, that they hung on the wall. And he went to the phone. I went to the phone and I called the paper company and I said, cancel my subscription. I only want it on Sundays, because I'm not going to be ever caught in that trap. So if you think about some of those hacks and the YouTube journeys that you do with your phones, and I've got kids, and I've got kids that are parents, right? I've got grandchildren, and I see the parents with their phones, and I'm thinking like, why don't you leave your phone in the car when you're talking to your kids, right? When you're trying to play with your kids, put your phone in the car and play with that baby, play with those babies. So again, trying to find some hacks that you can use to do that. Again, I've always been a big proponent of date nights and those kind of things, trying to carve out time. You know, if you're going to be really good at work, you're going to be at work and you're going to be deeply involved in it. You know, some of the stories that I've told in the past where, you know, my wife took care of all the bills in the house. I didn't even know what the gas bill was in my house. I still don't know what it is, because that's the piece that allows me to focus on work, where she handles that end of the house. So maybe dividing and conquering some of the duties, but I think at the most is, think about the little things you can do to show the devotion by just leaving the phone in the car. You know, I've been a big proponent when you walk into a house, and I know very few salespeople do it, but I've been selling business for Orkin for a long time. I never take my phone in with me on an appointment, because I don't want that customer to think I had an interruption. Now that's being totally focused on work. But again, work-life balance, I don't know that there's any secret out there if you're going to be really good at things. I guess Tim Brady talks about being in the moment all the time. And this is really, really pressing. You know, we've lost some really top salespeople because they couldn't figure out this work-life balance. And I worry about that, right? Because it's a real true thing. But I think what happens, and I think, you know, again, I'm the wrong guy probably for the advice. Get in the moment, stay in the moment, know where you're at, be present where you're at, and don't be thinking about other things. And if it takes leaving the phone and the iPad in the car until everybody goes to bed, and then you can go out and get it when everybody goes to bed, then do that. The other thing that Millette talks about a lot is getting up earlier, finding time for yourself if you need some of that time, or staying up later. You know, doing one of those two things to find that little bit of time that you need, that, you know, maybe you're cheating somebody out of when you're doing it, when you're around them. You know, if you're spending time with your spouse and, you know, you're thinking, boy, I need a half hour of me time, that's probably the wrong time to ask for the me time. Get your tail out of bed earlier and find that me time in the morning, versus stealing it from somebody else, because something has to give. I mean, you can't be two places at once. Everybody says that. You can't be in balance ever, I don't think, in anything. So maybe work-life balance, from, as Mr. Millette says, is a misnomer. Just stay in the moment, stay present, and realize that you got to do stuff to keep you there and to keep you away from being, you know, that dopamine hit when that phone goes off and that thing dings, drives everybody to the phone, and they want to see, ooh, what just came in. And at the end of the day, if you leave it in the car, you won't get it. And just maybe that's something to try. I don't know if that helps. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great tips. I mean, you have to focus on things that are important. And those are some great, it's great advice.
Much easier said than done, like I said, but think about staying present, staying in the moment, and really focusing on it. And I have seen some benefit in leaving my phone in the car and away from my person, and when I'm not at work. Yeah. Because I think, you know, with phones and the way that the connectivity that we have these days, you know, I don't know that we can get away, but you can put that phone away and get away.
That's great advice.
See what happens. That's all I got.